Hello and welcome to Coffee with Artists. This is a chat series that we're hosting as part of New Haven's citywide open studios. And Roy, would you like to begin by sharing what inspires you?
Sure. Um, well, what inspires me is being out the in the woods, uh, by the beach. I grew up in the South in a rural area, but that's a very special place to me, and that's where I feel most at home with a camera. Um, when I was a child, I used to spend a lot of time just wandering in the woods. Photography that most people in New Haven are familiar with that I've done is basically landscape photography, or one of the key things in that was going to visit my son in China after he graduated from college. He was he moved to China, and he's still in the East Asia, and traveling around China, I was just so inspired by the very different cultural ethos that they have about the natural world. And
I think your work has a really a Zen feel to it as well, which I don't know if it always did or if it's just select pieces that I've seen, Roy, but it does remind me of, it seems to have that Eastern influence, and I love and a meditative feel. And I love what you say about nature being inside us as well, because that's that's also what I feel, and what inspires me is the not only the outer landscape and nature but also the inner landscape, and what happens through meditation. So a lot of my paintings are either from a meditation. In other words, I'm sitting in meditation and an image emerges in my mind that I then paint, or the painting is actually a meditation in itself. Yeah.
So it's interesting because mine, it comes from a completely the same space but different space, in that talking about childhood and just wandering through the woods, I would do the same, but looking for secret things. And I would find, certain places where branches were leaning down and I could sit under there, and that would make this little secret space for myself. And the house that I grew up in was from the early 1800s. And there were a lot of secret spaces in there too, because it had been talking about meditative state. I did just realize recently that my work only comes to me based on not trying anything at all, allowing, like the piece I have up right now is, I didn't come up with the idea to do it. I was invited to do something, and going there and just allowing it to grow in front of me is what happened, the idea. So it's the same kind of idea. I can't force it. I have to allow it to just happen. It all has, either something has to click, a word has to be said, a space has to look a certain way, which is another reason why I do photography also, but I don't show it. But I love walking through the woods and finding things to photograph, to remember. So
Yeah, I do the same. I was a photographer. I guess I've always been a photographer, and grew up in my cousin's darkroom. She's quite a bit older than me. So she was developing photographs, and I was a kid, it's so excited about putting the paper in the fixative and the, whatever else, watching the images emerge on the paper is the coolest thing. And I also spent a lot of time in nature as a child, but we also moved around a lot. So I don't think of that as an influence so much. Mm-hmm. But there is something about taking pieces from the environment, whatever that is. And so lately, for the last 10 years or so, that's included taking things that I find or that I've used and can't continue to use, and making fashion from it. So like this necklace.
Oh, is that what your necklace is?
Yeah, it's batteries and
oh, that's so nice.
electrical wire that I found on the street and
Yeah.
duct tape. You know, I had to.
One of
Nice.
my
Very
pet
nice.
peeves is people who talk about capturing things with their camera because, it's if they're out hunting and they're going to take possession of some object or creature.
Yeah.
And I prefer to think, and I think it's more accurate in terms of my process, about looking for circumstances to be captured myself by what I see, where I'm not so, I don't go out with, as I think you were saying, Susan, I don't go out with something in particular in mind, but I go out and try to be in a frame of mind where I can really notice what's around me and be able to resonate with something and have that sort of determine how I take the picture or make the picture. So I've gone back to black and white because it feels like a more elemental way to see the world and to get away from the sort of strictly, realistic aspect of color landscapes. In addition, with this photograph and having trouble getting this, okay. With this photograph and some others I'm going to show you. Yeah, here we go. Not only is it in black and white, but I have moved the camera during the exposure. And that's also a way that I'm trying to explore the possibility of evoking a more sort of subjective experience of what's in the picture, and also to sort of allude to the fact that what we see is not permanent. It's constantly changing and can be very elusive, and not everyone's perception is the same. And so what I'm trying to explore here is the sense that perception is much more complex and sort of vulnerable to the individual's perception and what they bring to it than one might conventionally think. I think there might, no, that's the
They're
last one.
beautiful.
So I'll go back.
They really are.
Go
These
back to
I love them.
all the pieces I was referring to before that do have a Zen feel, but these don't. These are really evocative and like
Yeah.
I almost feel like they're yelling at me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but not in a bad way, but it's giving me the sense that like the forest is
Yeah.
speaking to me. And
Like the
so
voices in the forest. Yeah.
yeah, where so many nature photographs, they're kind of placid and but these I feel like I'm really hearing the voices of nature, calling me to pay attention.
Well, there's
the one with that big tree trunk is so, that trunk is so standing watch so strongly. It's just, I love that piece so much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So my process, I mean, I'm going to focus on the visual art, but I'm also a writer. So I have a few different processes that all kind of intermingle. And I really didn't start painting seriously until a few years ago. Prior to that, I just painted badly, and then made trash fashion. So the trash fashion, although these are more recent pieces, which are upcycled, it's really inspired by my environmentalism, my passion for recycling, for upcycling, the interest that I have with found objects. the sweaters that comprise this one sweater were pieces that I, bought for myself and then tired of. And this is another piece that's just made from multiple sweaters that, for whatever reason, weren't working. There's like a bit of a car mirror that I found on the street, and um, the confetti was made from discarded credit cards and IDs and things that I just punched, turned into confetti with a hole punch. Upcycled fabric. It's got, I don't know if I can zoom in on this. It's got, a charging cord for a phone and the earbuds that no longer work, macrameed together. Um, a little reflector that I found on the street. So my influences in trash fashion, were really about environmentalism and play, having fun, making something useful and in some ways beautiful from what was trash. And then that also influenced me once I started painting seriously. Um, then I discovered that I could also turn my canvases into articles of clothing. So this piece, is kind of a fun vest. This is a little jacket that at City Wide Open Studios last year, people were coming in and trying on the little jackets. So, and this is that same piece, except I'm the one wearing it now at the opening of City Wide Open Studios last year. But there's that. And but the main thing, at least for the purposes of this talk, is the painting that just really comes out of. This is the first piece where I was studying with Kwejo Adai, and I walked into his studio and he asked what I wanted to paint. I said, I don't know. And he said, well, meditate in front of the easel and then start sketching. And so I did, and I opened my eyes and started, drawing these lines, and I didn't know what it was. I was just moving with, what was emerging from that meditation, and I thought, oh, this is fun. It's going to be some sort of paisley pattern, but then I kept making lines, and then I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's not a paisley pattern. That's the inside of a woman. Like, okay, so now we're turning this into a celebration of the feminine, and since then, really, that's all that my paintings have been. They've just become this either a moving meditation, as this piece is, or coming from a vision that I had in a meditation, like this piece, which I call Third Eye. As my meditation process has changed, which since the pandemic I've been practicing Kundalini yoga, my painting has changed. So, I'm seeing these eyes all the time. But yeah, my process is really it's both simple and complex. I'm always playing with the techniques. I use a lot of I call it control and release, because there's the aspect of the painting that I really want control over, and then there's the aspect that I just let go. So this is a good example of that. I think, and here's another example of eyes that are. In terms of my process, I have an easel, but I often paint on the table so that I can throw paint around and use a lot of water and make a little bit more of a mess without destroying my walls. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. So, and here's that piece right behind me.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is about, it was just a way of processing. You know, I think, I don't know how many artists talk about this, but I know for me, a lot of the things come out of meditation, and it's a way of just, you know, processing life. And right now, you know, we're in this pandemic, and it's a very stressful time for everybody. And
I know, you know, it's funny because you would think with this pandemic, with all the alone time that you would be, not you, myself, I would be more focused. And I find I'm less focused and I'm taking on way too many things because I'm kind of jumping around and trying to find a focus. And I'm not, it's odd to me that I wouldn't just be thinking, well, this is great. I can't go outside. I might as well sit and work in my studio, but very distracting.
so there's so many avenues, like you say, Susan, of like, oh, and
Yeah.
I can do this and that. And so I'm trying to really like
Yeah.
hone in on what, you know, my dharma
All right.
is.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about the centrality of meditation in your expressions. But for me, although I have a daily meditation practice, when I go out with my camera, or when I'm at home working with the exposures that I've brought back, that is a very meditative process for me. I mean, I'm just really trying to let whatever I see come into me and inhabit me, and try to notice what the response is and have that direct me.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh my goodness. Susan, are you ready to share?
So really my inspiration, as I had said in the beginning, is really about stuff from my background and my childhood.
All right.
Inspiration from growing up in a very isolated place. I spent a lot of time just wandering around, looking at a lot of things that, you know, I would be walking through the woods, and the things that would catch my eye were detritus kind of things, that they were things that had broken off, like maybe a piece of metal that had fallen off of a truck, or take some of my stuff like little tea sets and go out in the woods and have a little tea party, and then I would leave them there because I would sort of make up this idea that somebody else would come along and use them, and then I'd go back to see if they'd been moved or anything. So my work really is about that kind of discovery, and discovery of things that have had use or that have been pre-owned. The piece that you're looking at right now is at the Eli Center of Contemporary Art, and I do want to just show you what the space looked like. Let's see, shot. This is the space at the building. It's on the side of the building. And when I got there, I first wanted to build a wall that would, where those bricks are, there would be a standing wall with these pieces on it. And I realized that there was just no way to put it there safely. Again, it's sort of necessity is the mother of invention. So I went back and I thought, well, I really like this space. What can I do? So I decided to take those same pieces and fill up that space. As you're standing on the wall and look down at it, this is what you see. And it has that feeling of that the roof had been redone, and this is what was taken off of the roof and discarded. But because, you know, it was kind of a hidden space. So if that had happened and nobody had bothered to clean up this one space. I have another image of it that is, I don't think I have on the website yet.
What are those pieces, Susan? I had that same question, Rebecca.
Oh, what are they?
Yeah, what are they
Well, they're roofing paper, and then I had painted them and colored them with some pastels and speckled them with some paint and drew on them. And then as they get wet and then dry again, they curl.
Okay.
Which is what's a really nice thing about that. So I'll show you now. This is where they were when they were actually on a wall outside. And you can see how with the sun on them, they'd gotten wet. And then when the sun dried them, they all curled up. And then when it would get cool at night and the sun would go away, they'd flatten down again. So they were really very physical.
my God,
Um,
they're like
so
leaves.
and yeah, they're there. They are actually on the
Mm,
wall.
mm,
You can see the color. I love the color of them. They look very much like, they look like the scales of a prehistoric being. They look like the roof turned on its side. I was curious how many things might start living in between them when it was outside for a while. So it's almost like their little home, these little spaces. Um, if you think about the stories as children that we learned about the fairies that would live in the woods, and if you just found them, they'd disappear and you'd never find them again. But that kind of feeling. This was the first wall that I ever did, and this was at a gallery here in Westville. And this is all newspaper. So let's see if I can get one that's closer. So that shows you that what I was doing is taking newspapers and ripping them into 4 pieces, dyeing them with sumi ink, and then hanging them in the studio like laundry, letting them dry, and then taking them down and then doing a whole nother set of them. And that is the very meditative part for me, is actually, that sense of hanging things, hanging laundry, watching my grandmother and my aunts hanging the laundry in the winter, and the sheets would freeze, and, just a lot of memory kind of stuff. And then this is another wall at Westover School. And this piece has 2,500 pieces of paper in it. And so to create that was so enjoyable, to just know I had a certain amount of things to do and I had to get them done by a certain time. And I figured it all out, how many I had to do each day in order to do that. And then to pack them all up, bring them there, and then hang them was part of the meditation. This is at another exhibit in Danbury, Connecticut. And I want to see if I have a picture of them before well, you can see here on this orange stuff down here, I hang that on the wall, and then I hang them on there with clothespins. I don't know if I have an installation shot right here, but let's go back to.
Love that piece so much. And that's at the Eli Center. This is outside the Eli Center.
Yeah, it's at the Eli Center now. It'll be there through November. I don't know why I'm having trouble getting out of this.
I love the
You know why?
physicality of it.
Wait, can we just look at this piece for a minute? This is just amazing.
Yeah.
It feels like leaves. It feels like feathers. It feels very natural, even though it isn't.
I know. It does feel very natural. And when you rub your hand down on it, you get this textural feeling. And on the interior ones where I did with newspaper, when you rub your hand on it, you hear this crunching. And also when you walk by it, they move as you walk by.
Well, and you
some
amazing like tree stumps too out of newspaper.
Yes, I have. I've done. Let me see. Let's get to some of that. The reason I couldn't get out of here is because the little video was covering up my thing. I've also done. So here's the picture of them actually hanging in my studio, and it gives me such pleasure to do it. It's almost like that's what I want to do more than actually finishing. And then when you were talking about the clothing, I also made a bunch of overcoats and suits out of newspaper that I dyed, and then I made sewed sheets of it together to create strips almost of fabric, and then cut those patterns out and created these.
We were in the same show, Susan, in the Art Walk in 2017 with I had 3 dresses in that show, and you had 2 or 3 of these coats.
Yeah, we'll get to. Let me show you those are now the thing. Wait, let me go back.
I remember that one.
Yeah, so this was, I originally had bought coats at Salvation Army, and I covered them with paper mache and had this show in West Haven. And then I took it down and I put them in dress bags and put them in my studio. And one day I noticed an awful lot of moths in the studio, and I opened up the bag and all these moths flew out. There must have been larvae or something in the coats. I don't know what it was, but I couldn't keep them. I mean, I had a terrible time getting rid of all my wool sweaters got eaten. It was awful. So Bill Fisher said, well, if you want to hang them outside at my house, you can. We'll just let them disintegrate. So that's what's happening here. And then I moved to doing just the all paper coats because I couldn't risk that with the moths again. But, you know, there's something about, I also just had some pieces eaten by mice. And there's something about it that I haven't figured out yet what I want to do, but about that, the destruction of it by nature itself,
Mm-hmm.
and how I could do that in a way that would not draw mice, first of all. Because here in my studio, I had a piece that we had a mouse here that was eating it. So we had to, you know, I had to hang everything from the ceiling and keep it from the floor, or find it, you know, rather than finding another way to do it that insects and mice wouldn't want, how could I use that in the work somehow? Trying to see. So this is what was in that show with you, Rebekah.
Yep.
And this was a serape that I made. Originally, I made it just to hang on the wall because I was influenced by that Annie Albers show at Yale Art Gallery and her fabrics that she had woven. But it just didn't, you know, once I did that, I thought, no, I've got to make this out of this piece that could be worn. And I made one side with the small pieces of paper and the other side with just kind of graphic images.
Wow. Well, this is a really fun conversation. I'm glad to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
Great.
much, Susan. Thanks, Roy.